Happy Monday night, guys. I'm glad to have you guys here. Today is Monday, May 14th. Now, listen, one of my viewers sent me in an article about corporate buybacks in the stock market. It says, here's a thought. Maybe the stock market won't crash this year because it can't. That's the name of the article. And I want to thank my viewer for sending me in this article. It's a very important article to talk about. It's about corporate buybacks in the stock market. And, oh man, we're in so much trouble, guys. Honest to goodness. The more I look into things like these corporate buybacks and ETFs and everything, the more you can actually see that the stock market is being held up basically with almost like a Ponzi scheme. But it's been pumped up almost like a pump and dump when everything's been pumped up, and finally the last man in pushes it up as high as it's going to go, and it starts to fall back, and everybody's going to haul out. They're going to haul out as fast as they can. The whole thing's going to come down really hard. Now, when you consider that what the Fed's doing and what's raising interest rates is making bond yields more attractive, much more attractive. It's starting to become almost everybody wants yield. When you look at the stock market yield over a period of a year, and you take a look at the U.S. 10-year, you're looking at very similar yields. The thing is if the 10-year goes up much more, then the yield on the 10-year is going to outstrip the yield in the stock market. This whole thing is the reason why an awful lot of them have been leaving off, and they've been pulling money out of one and entering into the other, depending on just that rate is so close right now. It's so that they'll pull out of one and go into the other, and then they'll pull back out of one and go into the other, because it's just like a balancing stick, and they want to get on that side of the stick where they're going to get a little bit better yield. Look, they're so after yield right now that they're buying bonds from some of these countries that are basically bankrupt. Which country was it? Was it Argentinian bonds? Or was it Brazilian bonds? One of these countries anyway was offering a 100-year bond. And they're buying in. It's just absolute madness to try to chase yield. So everybody wants yield, and this is exactly what's going on here. Like, why would a company buy back its own shares? Since companies raise equity and capital through the sale of common and preferred shares, it may seem counterintuitive that a business might choose to give that money back. However, there are numerous reasons why it might be beneficial for a company to repurchase its shares, including ownership consolidation, undervaluation, boosting financial ratios. But here's one of the big reasons right here. Unused cash is costly. Each share of common stock represents a small stake in ownership of the issuing company, included in the right to vote, company policy, and financial decisions. If a business has managed owner and 1 million shareholders, it actually has 1,000,001 owners. Companies issue shares to raise equity and capital to fund expansion. They're all chasing yield. Unused cash is costly. They want to get it in someplace where they can increase yield. And so, because everybody's doing it, they're all buying back their shares, they're driving share prices up. It's almost like penny stocks or like pump and dumps. And if everybody's buying into a certain thing, they drive the price up. But what goes up must come down. And so this whole thing is a recipe for absolute disaster. Now, when you consider that what is kind of underpinning the stock market right now, and we see where the stock market is with this underpinning, it's still dropped off from its highs. And these buybacks are underpinning the stock market right now. Now, they're giving the Federal Reserve a false sense of security, because all this money is pouring in from these buybacks and these buyback programs, giving the Fed a false sense of security that they can keep going with this quantitative tightening program and that the whole thing is built on a Ponzi scheme. The fact that all of this money is poured in, when it starts to pour out, it can pour out just as fast as it was put in the first place, because it's a Ponzi scheme. Everybody is pumping. It's basically they're pumping the market up, and everything's well and good as long as these shares keep rising. But what about when they don't rise? And what about when the Fed gets the bond yields high enough to the point where it pays you to actually be in bonds rather than the stock market? 3.25%, guys, on the U.S. 10-year. And by that time, what would the 30-year be? We're looking at some pretty good yield, probably getting up, heading toward 4% on the 30-year. And everybody wants yield, and at a certain point, the stock market's going to be tanked out. If we see a massive drop in the stock market, everybody's going to try to pull out simultaneously. This is what I expect to be coming around the corner. And we saw a drop in the stock market when yields started to rise. What about when real yields start to rise again, and they start to rise really fast? Take a look at the 3-month LIBOR. It's been going up in stages, and like a stair step. And each stage of the stair step has been exactly 3 months. That is coordinated with the 3-month LIBOR has been coordinating with the quantitative tightening program. Every 3 months they increase the amount by $10 billion, and that is exactly what's been the stair steps for LIBOR. And so as LIBOR's been going up, so has the U.S. 10-year, and all the other bond rates have been going up. I plotted it this morning on my show, and what I see is probably within the next 2 weeks, I think we're going to see an increase in the yields on the 10-year. We're going to start to head towards 3.25%. Now, when we hit 3.25%, that does not mean automatic stock market crash. What it means is we're locked and loaded. We're ready. It's like when you're ready to fire. It's the stock market's ready to go. It's ready to turn over at that point. It might go up maybe 3.5% or 3.75. I'm not exactly sure where the stock market's going to roll over. How high are those yields going to have to get before they get more attractive than the stock market? And they pile out. Everybody out there is wanting to get the best bargain that they possibly can, and they don't care about anything else. They will pull everything out of the stock market if they're going to make more money someplace else. It's just as simple as that. And they're not going to pile in the gold right away, not until we get fear. It's going to take fear before they actually pile in the gold. And they're going to want physical at that point. And they're going to come back to the gold and silver market. They're going to come back to the gold and silver market when the fear hits. We're going to see an increase in bar and coin demand, physical bar and coin demand. We're going to see the silver market heat up again. The bar and coin demand market. The silver industrial market is already good right now. And they're taking most of the supply of silver that the miners are producing, and they're using it for things like solar panels, etc., electronics, and so on. They're using most of it. I mean, just take one U.S. Tommy Hawk type missile. Takes like 100 ounces of silver. Bang, it's gone when it hits the target, you know. We get into a war, there goes one heck of a lot of silver, guys. Every time they shoot off a Tommy Hawk missile, it's going to take 100 ounces. That can add up fast, let me tell you. So we see the uses of silver. There's so many different uses for silver. It's being used a lot in industry, whereas that doesn't happen with gold. Now, they've scoured the earth already, and they've looked for every ounce of silver and every silver mine, and I think they've found most of the best deposits already, and most of them have already been most of the best deposits on Earth have already been dug into, and the best part of the best deposits have already been dug out of the ground. I think we're past peak silver. That's my opinion on it. And I think at this point we're going to see declining mining production. At the same time, they've been just barely keeping up because coin and bar demand has been weak lately. And the reason why it's been weak is because they're keeping the price suppressed. You'd think people will want to buy the stuff when it's cheap. But no, they want to buy it when it's high. That being the case, let's get back to what we're talking about, these corporate buybacks. At a certain point in time, I can see this stock market starting to turn over. And I don't think it's going to get past a certain percentage, much past 3.25%, before we're really going to see the stock market turn over big. And I don't care about these corporate buybacks or not. Them saying that the stock market, he says, here's a thought, maybe the stock market won't crash this year because it can't. Well, that's what they said about the Titanic. They said the Titanic could not sink. Famous last words, guys. I'll tell you what. I've predicted a stock market crash before the end of this year, and I don't think I'm going to be disappointed. I think it's going to be, and these corporate buybacks is one of the reasons why it's going to be one hell of a crash. You know, the fact that they've pumped it up with these corporate buybacks, and they've pumped it up so much with these companies like Apple. You know, $650 billion in buybacks this year, a $100 billion buyback program by Apple. I'm going to tell you what, these iPhones is the basis of Apple's iPhones and their iPads. They've saturated the market. Right now, at this point, they've saturated the market. Everybody's got iPhones and iPads. They don't need more iPhones and iPads. The sales are going to drop off like crazy on this stuff because people have been saturated with it already. They don't need more. I mean, how many iPads and iPhones does a person need or want? After it's been like, it's what we're on, basically take your iPhones and iPads and look at the hula hoop. There was a time in history when every little girl had to have a hula hoop. Okay, better analogy would be these fidget spinners. Okay? There was a time a few months ago when every little kid had to have a fidget spinner. Okay? Right? And they were like $18 for a fidget spinner. Now, they're like $3 for $1 and they can't sell them because everybody's been saturated with fidget spinners. This is the same way with the iPhone and iPad. Right? There was a time when everybody would want, but it takes a little bit longer. I mean, fidget spinners was a quicker sort of a thing. But this thing with Apple iPhones and iPads, everybody wanted an Apple iPhone and iPad. Now everybody's got their Apple phone and iPad, is going to buy an Apple phone and iPad, and their market has been saturated. And at this point, because they saturated the market, what they did was they raised the company shares up to the moon. Now it's ready to fall. Ready to fall because the market's been saturated. You're going to see a terrible fall off in sales of these items because everybody's got one already. They're going to try to push the latest and greatest, but how far can they go with these new iPhones? They're just repeating the same old iPhone they had last year, but with a new number on it. iPhone 10, iPhone 20, iPhone X, iPhone this, iPhone that. But it's all just basically taking the same old thing and regurgitating it over and over and over again. You're going to see a massive drop in the price of the company, and this is probably a big chunk of the stock market right there, just in that one company alone. That's overpriced, overvalued. Everything's overpriced and overvalued right now, and be prepared. That's all I can say. Listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye.